Hey, Dawn, thanks for doing this. Hope you're feeling well. Assuming that you guys will get to go play tomorrow, will you have the full roster available?
Yes, we got our full roster. Well, yeah, if all the tests come back negative, we'll have the full roster.
Joe and then Greg.
Coach, that being said, how has prep for Kentucky gone, considering you guys have had to momentarily pause because of these pending results?
Mostly virtually. So we got the scouting report in, and if all goes well, we'll practice at 5 to put that game plan to work. So one day.
But more, I mean, just in terms of the uniqueness of that prep, because it's virtual, do you think what are the challenges associated with a virtual prep as opposed to being able to be on the floor and really work with your team leading up to a game against a high caliber opponent like Kentucky?
We're used to 2 days. Obviously Kentucky, they run somewhat similar plays that they've run in the past. So we know the plays. It's just sometimes you got to get timing down. You have to have other options that you need to get down. But also, we've been off for 3 days, and literally off for 3 days. So, get your stamina back up a little bit. But I think, hopefully the adrenaline of playing and not, having to sit out for several more days is probably more exciting than not. And the anticipation of negative tests should give us a little bump to do something.
Greg and then Mitch.
Yeah, Don, even if you guys are able to play tomorrow, as obviously you want to, but just how stressful have these past few days been for you guys?
They're not stressful. It's just you're just waiting in anticipation. It's par for the course being in the COVID season. This is basically our first time during the season having to deal with something like this. And then most people are just completely shut down, and they don't really know that, they don't have an opportunity to play. We got an opportunity. So there's a lot of drama. The plot thickens every single day, but in a good way. So, it's, we're playing the cards that we've been dealt in, and hopefully we can, we can play tomorrow.
Mitch and then David.
Coach, obviously you guys would have been prepping for the game on Thursday. What's this week been like for you guys, just seeing everything that's happening in the nation's capital? And what have the conversations been like with your team?
That happened on Wednesday. We haven't talked to our team about what's taking place. I'm sure they've been watching it. But for me, it's reflection. It makes you reflect on, what took place in the summer and what took place on Wednesday, and the stark difference of where we are with things. And I'm not afraid to say it. That's one of the main reasons why our players sit during the national anthem. It is that situation. That is what us have had to deal with all of our lives. And I have yet to have anybody, call out those acts in DC as disrespectful or despicable or all of those adjectives that our players have been called over the past few months because of what they're doing. Have yet to have anybody that's reached out to me, that's come on my timeline, that's come on my phone, have yet to condemn that action. And that's disheartening.
David and then Michelle.
Dawn, I think I pretty much ask you this every year, but Kentucky, you talk about Ryan Howard, and just what makes her such a tough matchup. Do you have to throw a bunch of players at her to try to limit her? What can you do to try to slow her?
That's hard. That's hard. That's hard. She's such a great player. Like, you look at her, you watch her, she just plays at her own speed, and that speed is seeing every option out there on the floor. and making the right option. I do think we have to speed her up, make her play faster, make her make decisions quicker. I do think we need to exhaust her, make her play on both sides of the floor. And we've tried to do that every time that we've played. And, we've been successful a small percentage at a time. I think they are a better team than they were last year. They're healthier. They got a lot of options offensively. So it's a pretty tough matchup for us, but one that we welcome to play.
Michelle and then Greg.
Yeah, Coach Staley, I have two questions if I could. The first being, and there's nothing new about this, how good the SEC is, but when you look at this particular year with 3 teams in the top 10, 2 more in the top 25, Tennessee, I think will get in. That doesn't even include Georgia and Alabama with 1 loss each. How do you characterize the depth this particular year in terms of not just good teams, but I think teams that could make deep runs into the NCAA tournament?
I mean, we've grown up. I could remember in our spring meeting maybe 2 years ago, or maybe 3 years ago, where, it was embarrassing, to be quite honest. But then you go back, our coaches all looked at, we were the youngest league around the country. And now 2 years later, we are, we're ripe, we're ripe. And you're seeing the patience of ADs with allowing coaches to coach and allowing their teams to grow and mature. And now, we find ourselves in this place where, every night you're scratching and clawing for a win, whether you're home or whether you're away. I mean, it's the SEC, and this is what we've developed into, and it's quite nice to compete every single night and not know what the outcome is going to be.
And the other night, Tennessee, all but one of their players kneeled, and Kelly Harper said after that game that one thing that was tough for her is she knows that it's painful to her players when their own fans sometimes boo them or say negative things. And so she's had to talk to her players about, she knows that's hurtful. I'm sure you've had those same conversations. What do you tell them about their own fans sometimes who don't understand what the protests are about?
Well, I mean, when you decide to do something that is not liked by the masses, you set yourself up for, some backlash. I mean, our kids are strong. I mean, this is what they've dealt with all of their lives. So is it anything new? No, it's not anything new. But certainly when you have mostly adults who have lived half of their lives and they've been able to experience what they experience through their eyes, really judge, young people who are in their formative years, that's disheartening. And to not ask the question why, they just look at an act and say it's, again, despicable or disrespectful, or I've heard, thoughtless. I mean, I've heard all these words, and it's, but I haven't heard the question as to why, but we got our why on Wednesday. We got our why, a big why on Wednesday. And everybody that said those things, their mom's the word, so, when our players sit, when Tennessee kneels, and I don't want to speak for Tennessee, this is the reason why. Because we live in, there's America that's truly divided, and we don't like it. And that's what we're trying to bring awareness to. Bring awareness. It's about being aware. It's not about, it's about being able to disagree and understand and support. You can support without agreeing. And that's where we're trying to get people to understand about what's happening. And should we shut up and dribble? No, we should not shut up and dribble. No, we shouldn't. There were veterans um, that charged the doors of the Capitol. There were politicians. You go down the line, there was somebody in somebody in every profession. And I'm sure there was somebody that played sports, Division I sports, Division II, Division III. So when you tell us to shut up and dribble, when those same people are doing what they did on Wednesday, no, because that impacts all of us. What they did impacts all of us. So we're not going to just shut up and dribble. We're going to live our lives. We're going to keep our eyes open, and we're going to speak out on things that hit our heart in a certain way.
Thanks, Coach.
Greg, and then Joe.
Dawn, just bring it back to Kentucky for a sec. Obviously, Ryan Howard is a really good player and gets a lot of the talk, justifiably so. But what do you make of their transfers that they seem to have, kind of unlocked them to go a little bit further this year?
Yeah, I mean they're deep. They're deep. COVID has gotten, and I know Kara's probably dealing with just the depth that she thought she could have delayed it, a year, but now she's got a roster full of all Americans that she's got to find time for. That makes them stronger. That makes them incredibly deep. And they all do a lot. They all do different things. So you got to scout all of them. But Robin's great. Plays both sides of the ball. Massengale's great. In that she's a lead guard that that can that has incredible court vision. Who else? You got the big. I know she's from Utah. I mean, they all add something a little bit different to their team while strengthening them at the same time. But luckily for us, only 5 can play at once.
Joe, and then Mitch.
Coach, I know you've spoken on this before in terms of the importance as to why you share your voice, especially when there are turbulent times. Do you think now more so than ever, it's important to keep amplifying your voice and your team's voice as well on matters such as this, when you see a nation divided and you feel that these attacks on your players have been unfair as they are throughout?
Oh, louder than ever. I got ammunition now. Got ammunition, because sometimes you when you can't see it with your own eyes, you have a tendency to live in this imaginary world. There's nothing imaginary about what took place on Wednesday. There's nothing imaginary about what took place in the summer. There's and I don't, violence is something that, I don't want to ever have to actually endure in my life, just me. Seeing it is bad enough. But we got to take our blinders off. We have to continue to have these uncomfortable conversations because it is people's experiences. If 5 people died out there, we should not take that for granted, and we should not be okay with it. We should not be okay with it. I don't care who it was. We should not be okay with what took place. And it was very avoidable. It was not called for. But also we need to call it what it is: domestic terrorism.
Mitch, and then Keith.
Sorry, I was having a problem unmuting. Coach, obviously, you talked about this Kentucky team, Ryan Howard, and what they present. How do you think, trying to slow down, as you said, all these transfers and pieces that they've added, how do you think trying to slow them down, but also try to get you guys started out offensively better? You talked about starting the games better, but when you have a player like that you have to focus on defense so much, is it more so just trying to focus on the defensive end first and that turn into offense, or do you try and be aggressive on offense as well early on?
No, I mean, you have to make a team like Kentucky play you on both sides of the ball. I mean, I know we talk a lot about defending, Ryan, and cut down her vision, but a big part of that is making her play on the other side. You know, we have to make her play for as long as she's out there on both sides of the ball, because, you know, we have to tire her out. She can't shoot as efficiently as she shoots in minute 1 of the game and minute 40 of the game. And that's for all of them. I mean, we have to put them back on their heels. We have to figure out ways in which we get our post involved and get them involved fairly quickly. I do think we have an advantage in that area. I think the very biggest thing is, you know, just keeping them from shooting, you know, and making a lot of 3-point baskets. We can't trade those baskets with them because we haven't shot the ball as well consistently from out there. Or we haven't really shot the ball inside either, but we certainly have to make sure that we're making layups and we're making them play on both sides of the ball, and particularly Ryan, because she's a big part of what they do.
It looks like we'll close it out with Keith.
Hey, Coach, Happy New Year. Sorry for being late to the show here. 2 questions. One, I probably missed. Have you been able to, how much practice time have you been able to get in, and will you be at full strength tomorrow? And then second, President-elect Biden was asked about, you know, how does this bode for him? He said he felt like this would make his job easier to bring people together. Do you think that because of what happened at the Capitol, that this could be an opportunity for the peaceful, nonviolent protests, the respectful protests, to, you know, be viewed in a different light?
One, we've practiced virtually. So for whatever, I mean, I know we got some good work in. We got the mental part of our practice in. 2, we'll be at full strength, barring, you know, if everybody's negative. And then 3, I did hear President-elect Biden speak yesterday, and he's got a tough job. He's got a tough job that, you know, I don't know if I would want that job, you know, because you got 75 million people that voted for the current president that stormed the Capitol. How you get those people to change their views, I have no idea. And I wouldn't want that job, because it ain't one that, you know, you just can sit down and talk to, or it's not one that you can implement new laws that they have to abide by. So I don't know. I can only hope and pray that, you know, the young people that we're in charge of leading can get a chance to see something very different than all of us have seen in our lifetime. I can only hope and pray that occurs.